years and counting in the space of human capital, talent management, performance management, primarily human resources, and had the opportunity of working across the borders, right from US, Middle East, India, Singapore, and hopefully get to work in multiple countries eventually as well. But a quick one, I love to divide my entire experience into three parts. The first part is, where I work with the services organizations like Sintel and Wipro, eventually moving on to product companies like McAfee, Intel, and then eventually, my last 10 years. And surprisingly, I had a epiphany today morning that, I'm almost completing my 10 years in the startup space this month.
Amazing.
So last 10 years in multiple startups like Practo, Grab in Singapore, Zeta. I had my own entrepreneurial journey with Peak Performer, and then Talent 500 eventually. Also had the opportunity to kind of coach, probably play a business consultant to some of the early stage startups. Give them the guidance. So overall, this journey has been pretty exciting, full of ups and downs, but super grateful for this entire run.
Fantastic. And that amazing experience is what we're looking to leverage in this conversation today. As you know, this show every week that I do is essentially to help leaders help frame their personal narrative, build their personal brand, especially at this time of AI where everything is AI perfect, and I think it's those moments of imperfection, and how is it that you can then lean into some of that and really shine a light of that on that very comfortably, but in practical ways, using a little bit of strategy and tactics. So one of the things that I believe every leader does really well is, especially the ones who've had an amazing career like Saurabh, you have had, and you've just given us an overview of it, is that many of these leaders tend to have a framework as a point of reference, right? And you have mentioned in our conversation that today you'll tell us about something called the 3E framework. So maybe if we can start with that, and let's see where the conversation goes.
Absolutely. So before we kind of get to the 3E as a framework and the concept that probably I practice and how I've kind of used that to leverage my personal brand, here's a quick one. Your brand isn't what you are talking about. It's primarily what Google, LinkedIn, or any other social media platform, along with your peers, is what they are talking about, while you're not in the room.
100%.
So in today's world, I would say if you're not shaping them, somebody else is shaping your narrative, right? So that's something is a starting point for all of us to kind of understand that why personal branding is super important for not just for leaders but for every professional at this point. Second, why does it matter? Whether you're working in Silicon Valley, Berlin, Bangalore, I think your digital impression, or digital footprint is your first impression.
Mm-hmm.
So, even before somebody meets you, interacts with you, whether you're setting up an interview call or probably it's a casual check-in, and if you haven't met that person, the first natural instinct for all of us is to look up for this person, whether it's on LinkedIn or social media and so on and so forth. So your digital footprint literally is your first impression in today's world. So in my experience, I've also, realized that many a times, leaders who invest in their personal brand attract disproportionate opportunities for themselves. And, I personally would like to kind of say, I'm a living example of it. I started writing on LinkedIn, because I felt it as my need initially, not to kind of, create a brand, because I still remember, I think in heart, I'm a natural teacher. Started my career also in learning and development space. So I'm a giver in that sense. So I remember that I had stopped probably writing for a very long time, and one of the ex-team members apparently told me this, that you're doing disservice by not passing on your knowledge. And I think that's the, I would say, inflection point wherein I became a little more consistent. And eventually I attracted a lot many opportunities, not just about writing on LinkedIn, but conversations, people across the globe whom I never probably would have met in my regular course of action. Today eventually are, my sounding board, or, I've attracted opportunities accordingly.
Hmm.
So, that's the beauty of kind of creating a personal brand for yourself. If you're a leader, I must say that you have to. If you are an early professional, I think, we are all aware of the compounding effect. So,
Yeah.
you start early and then eventually you kind of reap the benefits.
Yeah.
But let's quickly move to the 3E, formula that I typically apply. And the way to look at it at this point in time, in the way, are two lenses. And as I talk, I want you to wear both of them, so that it's easier to get from which lens I'm talking. The first lens is that you create a narrative from your own experience. All right. And the second way to look at it also is, what do you do of that narrative? All right. In my way of looking at it, I would say you create a perspective, or you create a credibility, or you create a brand from it. Right. So these are two ways I would urge everyone who's listening today to kind of look at, how do you kind of look at this 3E framework. So the first one is, I would say education, because that's like the basic. Now, formal degrees are important. Your formal education is kind of very important as a part of your career journey, because that's like your baseline. But at the same time, why did you study certain subjects? For in my case, I'm a computer science student, turned into an HR professional, and I'm sure there's a story behind it. Now, in my jovial way, a lot of times I say that I prefer to decode human minds as opposed to computers, and that's the starting point of my conversation with a lot of people. People relate with it, and they ask me, okay, but then why, what, and so on and so forth. And I think that's a brilliant conversation starter. Now, in your educational journey, I'm sure you must have taken probably out of course subjects, or for that matter, you had an extracurricular activity, or you just had an amazing college life. And you can talk about some of your profs, or people that you met, and so on and so forth, and how your entire education or educational journey kind of got construed. And that's a narrative that you can talk about it, right? And when I say talk about it, you can create it, at the start, and then eventually we'll see how you can probably use it to your benefit as well. All right. I did get obsessed at a point in time in my career journey with, I would say, collecting niche certifications. Back in the day, I think there was a lot of value that was given, or a lot of weightage that was given, for people who had certificates or certifications or higher qualifications beyond your formal education. So
Hmm.
I still remember, I started kind of questioning myself at a point in time, that what do I do about them? But when I looked back, each one had a story, or a backstory, as I call, why did I pick that up? And there was a trigger, a conversation with my manager, or probably, feeling a lack at that point in time, that, hey, I don't know this area. And that is what led me to kind of do that. And if I kind of understand that whole narrative, I can probably make the best use of it. So that's, for me, is education. No, I'm not a great fan of monologues, so I'm going to urge people in the chat channel to kind of answer this question before I move to the next E. What's one skill that you have picked up in the recent years that probably is changing or has changed your career trajectory? So I'll kind of like to see a few people putting in the chat channel. What's been your journey like, and what's that one skill that you have picked up recently that has changed or is changing your career journey? All right. Let's move on to the next one. All right, and that's exposure. Now, the way to look at exposure at this point in time is that higher visibility will give you better opportunities. Now, how do you create that visibility? Um, Again, I'll kind of probably go back to my college or my B school days, wherein there are a lot of these clubs. And if you volunteer, in one of the clubs, probably it will attract, get you noticed, get you a few brownie points, and so on and so forth. So I was part of the dramatics club, I was part of the debate club, and so on and so forth. And eventually, a lot of people kind of started noticing. So I eventually got an opportunity to be an MC at one of the college events. I was, for one of the sports event, I was one of the commentators, at that point in time. So all I'm trying to say is, it's very interesting at this point in time that how do you look at creating visibility for yourself? If you're writing regularly, consistently on LinkedIn, that's also another way to kind of create visibility for yourself. Now, I still remember before I move on to the next one, and I just like to kind of throw in this as a thing that there's never a perfect time to begin anything. All right. We always would end up kind of feeling like an imposter, or probably, getting this feeling that I'm not enough. So, probably I would make a fool of myself if I write, or if I expose myself, or if I kind of, put myself out there. So all I'm going to urge all of you is just start somewhere. It's okay. I got trolled when I first wrote on LinkedIn, many years ago, where somebody kind of ended up telling me, "You're not even an expert, but you're kind of giving an advice like an expert," and it's okay. I think it's a part of the whole journey. And I did respond to that person that thanks for letting me know. I'm definitely going to work more on it, right? And eventually, I've seen this person, following me today. So I think, the way to look at it is also how do you kind of, turn the negativity into positivity by probably taking it as a feedback, or, not taking it too much, personally. I was also, terrified of my first podcast ever. Today, as we, Karan and I talk about it, I'm sure you feel the confidence and the way probably, I'm
Of
talking.
course. Yeah.
But I was probably the worst, host that, or I mean, the guest any host could ever have. I mean, like that was my state at back then, and
But
that is how.
that's learning, right? Sort of the fact that you could actually lean into that and you put yourself out there.
Absolutely. And, it just feels so normal today. But back in the day, I was rehearsing, trying to get my choice of words right, and doing every, tiny bit. And then eventually I goofed up, and I got a feedback from the host equally that, I think it, in a way, tried giving me a message that probably I wasn't the best choice as a guest as well. All
Really?
right. But from there, you kind of, turn things around. You don't stop exposing yourself. You start kind of, pushing, getting more opportunities. I kept on writing. I kept on kind of, going on podcasts, webinars. And today, probably, it's history. I mean, of course, and I'm super grateful for that opportunity of not being able to do great, to be able to do what I'm doing today. So I think, exposure makes a huge difference in the way you build your personal brand as well. The last E for me is the first one, the second, add them. And that's how you probably, build your last E. It's experience. So if you have your education, you have enough exposure, is where you build your experience. All right. And experience is a kind of a follow on from what I just spoke. You keep on, building that. And I probably feel that, experience is like your badge of honor. It's a scars. It's your scars that you probably flaunt, you flex. And the way, I would say is also, it makes you a little humble. Share your failures, successes at the same point in time, give it out to the world, in the form of paying it forward as well. And that's the experience as well. Now, the formula looks very simple. There are times wherein, if you look at it, you will question yourself: do I even have the time to kind of put in the hours that are required for, say, a certification or otherwise? You might probably get overwhelmed, and honestly, even today, I feel sometimes the imposter syndrome, wherein somebody trusts me that I can talk about a topic with an authority on the
Yeah.
subject.
Yeah.
uh, Internally, you tend to question yourself. It's not that you don't know it and you're still faffing about it, but you tend to question yourself that am I the authority on the subject as well? All
Yeah.
right, so you are going to kind of go through that just before exposing yourself as well. And the experience is, how do you turn things in your favor? So if you don't know it, you study or you research or you kind of do it, but you kind of keep the momentum on building your experience through this whole thing. So in my way, I'm only going to say E plus E equals to 30. First is education plus your exposure builds your experience. And I think the final thing that I want to leave you on this framework primarily is the more you kind of build your experience, the more credible or credibility that you build as a professional. So yeah, I mean that's the 3E concept, on how do you build your narratives to taking it to building your credibility.
That's amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that, Saurabh. And I think it definitely leads to some exhilarating experiences, right? I mean, just by virtue of putting yourself out there. And to the people listening, whether you are a leader today or you're aspiring to be a leader tomorrow, some of the things that Saurabh, mentioned, right? A hallmark of a leader, the way I see it, is also the fact how uncomfortable. I mean, how comfortable can you get with uncomfortable situations, right? As if not everyone is, let's say, trained or necessarily has the experience of theater, but that is a skill that you can pick up, because we live in this time where picking up doing like a month-long course could make a significant difference, which long term could make a difference in how you write, how you show up on video, etc., right? And all of these things add up. The other thing I want to say is the great thing that I love about these conversations is that you get so much amazing value, but also they go by very quickly, right? So before you know it, it's already it's maybe the last 10-12 minutes, and we still have so much to go through. So if you have a question, please feel free to push it into the comments, because if not in the live right now, we will definitely answer them post the live as well and keep the conversation going. But the next thing that I definitely want to quickly jump into is your own personal experience of building your brand on LinkedIn, Saurabh, because I know that you're a pretty prolific writer. You write, 2-3 times, if not more, a week. You have a standard format. I get your quick update on WhatsApp as well. So what are some of the things that you have done to make sure that this is a repeatable and scalable habit while still managing a busy schedule as a leader?
Great. And I think, I'll combine two things that probably I wish to cover as a part of this as well. The first one is, why should anyone do it? We have spoken enough. First is to kind of build credibility. But if you are a leader specifically, it also helps you to attract talent, to join your teams and so on and so forth. I think just by putting yourself out there, about what you think about productivity, performance, these are some of the topics that I talk about, or for that matter, organizations, and you can define your own niche for that matter. But, these are some of the topics that I definitely and regularly write about. And knowing that, through your writing, there are times when people have proactively reached out to me stating that, I know that probably you don't have a position, but whenever it opens up, can you please consider me, as one of the top candidates? And I think that is something that I feel is extremely powerful, that every leader is obliged in a way, first to pay it forward on basis their experience. Number two, probably enjoy the benefits of byproduct of that as well, which is, attracting the right talent, the top talent, and so on. Third, I'm going to say probably it's a little personal, but when you write or when you kind of talk about certain topics, and that's your niche or micro niche, what ends up happening is you tend to get a lot of speaking or writing opportunities, or in my case, I've been lucky to be invited in some of the webinars, as a panelist, as a keynote speaker. I think purely because of what I've been doing. Of course, it's not something that you write one article and somebody is going to notice. Which is where the micro habits kind of come handy. So before I kind of go there, I have a short story. I have been writing for some time, consistently for the last 5 years. But I think well before that, I was into blogging and I used to put it up on the LinkedIn Pulse, and I think it's now called something else. So right from LinkedIn Pulse to probably consistently writing since 2020. Wherein I was bored, COVID, and I had lot to offer. So I started writing, and I specifically remember, I mean, me writing something about toxic workplaces and how leaders contribute to that. And I got reached out by a founder, and we had an amazing coffee conversation in one of the third wave equivalents.
Okay.
And that led to a coaching assignment and a follow through the whole thing. So all I'm trying to say is, an article, something that I was very passionate about. I wrote about it to probably getting, literally recruited as a coach, to probably kind of, continuing on as a follow through on that. I think this entire journey started with, again, going back with just me exposing myself, putting myself out there. Coming down to the micro habits quickly. Each one is different. So, I know a lot of people who put up posts or articles almost every day. There are some of us who, I put it twice a week. Typically, it's on Tuesdays and Fridays. And I have a community of people today who typically let me know that, it's more like a feedback. Hey, this is working, this is not working. So I'm blessed to have them. They're also the first ones to get to know if the post is out and so on. So I kind of, nurture that particular community today as a part of my broadcast as well. So I think that is one particular habit wherein you seek out regular feedback on how people are perceiving you. Do they appreciate your writing? Are there any topics that of our interest for them? So that's one thing. I'm more of a weekend person, and I love to call myself as a midnight monk. So, I'm at my peak in the, towards the midnight. So I have all my Eureka moments coming up in the night. I make a note of it in Google Keep, some of
Nice.
these Eureka moments, and I flesh them out over the weekend.
Nice.
So Saturday morning is, like sacrosanct 2 hours wherein I will flesh those thoughts, connect the dots. Probably will end up having an epiphany or eureka moments again. And I think that's one habit that, irrespective, even if I'm traveling, I'm busy, I'm not well, I will tinker around with certain thoughts and try and flesh it into a text, on a Saturday or a Sunday at best, and that gets kind of published the following week, or the weeks following, that entire content is being developed. Now, this time block is extremely important and it's sacrosanct. So there is no compromise on that. If you can't kind of make time, for something like this, then you kind of reschedule that time, but it's a must. Third, find out what are you passionate about. I think there are, imagine yourself that if you are to meet up with your friends after, some time, you're having your coffee, and you're talking about life in general. What are those topics that come to you pretty naturally? All right, and that's how you pick up your kind of micro niche or a niche, and build on it, because that's what I've been doing. Now, sometimes people come back and say, "Hey, I'm having a writer's block now. I don't have anything else to write. I've exhausted all my ideas." How do you kind of continuously keep on finding newer topics to talk about? So I call this as two ways to look at it. One is functional knowledge, and the second one is passion projects. The
Nice.
functional knowledge is something that you kind of you're passionate about. You research, you talk to people, mentors, and so on and so forth. Even if you don't have anything of that sort, steal from work, and that's my mantra. And steal from work does not mean that you steal your work literally, but steal at workplace. For
Hmm.
example, an email that triggered you, a behavior of a colleague that probably changed something in you, probably your interactions with your manager. These are inspirational ways to kind of correlate something that you are passionate about and something that happened with you. So that's an area to look forward. That's a open space. It's a continuous kind of thing that keeps on happening. So I'm sure you'll probably find tons of stories at workplace that you can translate. My only thing is, don't kind of go to an area which you think is gray and that's going to expose probably certain things at workplace. So word of caution here, be the best judge of this. You know what things can be exposed or written or probably put out there, and what cannot be. Second thing is something like a passion project. All right. And I think that's very naturally that comes to us. You could be passionate about fitness, nutrition. You could be probably passionate about even, trekking. I'm a biker, and I get a lot of my inspiration from biking. I'm also into a lot of these adventure sports. So something happens, something triggers, and those things tend to become my learnings. It could be something from your past as well, an incident with I recently wrote something about my interaction with my grandfather, and I
Wow.
think that's gotten, so many impressions and reactions, I think because it became so relatable. So I'm
Yes.
just saying that it doesn't need to be something that you need to be an expert before you put it out there. All right. And finally, I'm just going to say it's okay. It's a time where people understand if you're a budding writer, somebody who's trying to establish your brand on LinkedIn or any other social media. All I'm going to say is, keep at it, keep going. define your kind of niche, be consistent in putting your content out there, and make the best of your personal brand.
Fantastic. Such amazing, clearly well articulated insights over there. We have the last couple of minutes, and you actually have a schoolmate of yours who's just tuned in as well as saying hi. But I want to, we have about 2 minutes to go. And, you know, for everyone who tuned in and who hasn't, I would very much encourage you to share this particular episode with other people. You can even watch this particular link later because the recording is available, because it's so packed with so much of actionable advice, you know. And central to that, I, for me, what stands out, what I, when I work with leaders, I say, what is the one thing that you can talk about every day for the next 1 year? And if you look at, Saurabh has been very, very consistent about talking about his passion for people over the last 5 years and organizational development, right? So therefore, when people think of Saurabh, they think of that one thing as well. And broadly, he spoke to us about the three framework, which is education, exposure, and experience. Don't shy away from putting yourself out there. You have a unique experience. There might be other people in HR, but nobody has the unique set of combination of life experience and professional experience that Saurabh does, which is why when he shares what he does, it makes it so much more relatable. He also talked briefly about, you know, when you're leading into building your personal brand, lean into credibility. These are things that can be benefits, right? You come across more credible, you can attract a great talent and speaking and writing opportunities. And also in terms of micro habits, as he mentioned, focusing on functional, which is functional knowledge, which is work, and passion projects, which is outside work. So, you know, there's a lot to sort of unpack over here. I definitely encourage you to watch the recording again and share some of your thoughts as we come to the last minute. If you have any closing thoughts, Saurabh, and also if someone has to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Awesome, great. Finally, I just want to let everyone know that whatever personal brand that you create, it's your legacy. So do invest in kind of creating a legacy and leaving it behind. That's number one. Number two, be I mean, like, just be bold enough to put yourself out there. It doesn't matter. I have seen such great people holding themselves back just because with the fear of what happens if I get trolled or otherwise. So it's absolutely all right. I think build that mindset. Go with the flow. All of us have gone through it, so there's nobody spared if you put yourself out there and you don't get trolled. All right. And in this world of AI, we started with the world of AI. The world is changing and so on and so forth. I think people look out for authentic voice, and that
Yes.
comes from your experiences, your insights. So I
Yes.
think it's extremely important to kind of stand out in this totally changing AI-driven world. Finally, if you wish to reach out, I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. And I'm also on TopMate, so you could reach out to me on TopMate as well. I am super happy for all of you kind of joining in today. You could be anywhere in the world today, but you chose to be here. Thank you so much. I think this means a lot to me and to Karan. I've not been able to answer some of the questions, but I'll be more than happy to kind of take the DMs and take those offline. But thank you, Karan, for having me. Loved it, and hopefully we'll kind of continue having these conversations even in the future. Thanks a ton.
100%. Thank you so much for joining us, Saurabh. And like I said, we do this conversation every week. Next week, I'm speaking with Niharika Hariharan, the founder of Design 3. She's based in London, and she recently just was, she got a LinkedIn Top Voice badge. The kicker over there, which is, I definitely think is worth mentioning, a lot of LinkedIn is, I find it around vanity metrics, right? But if you're creating consistent value, people will acknowledge that. Saurabh has been creating consistent value on this platform for a long time, which is why, as you can see, he has a framework and there's a layer cake of so many actionables that he shared here today. Niharika has, when she got the Top Voice badge, she had less than 3,000 followers, but she's passionate about design and communication. So we're going to be breaking down her profile next week. But for now, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining me on this conversation, Saurabh. And 100%, I'm sure this is just one of many, many conversations that we continue to have. So thanks again, and see you next week at the same time.